Spoon, because I like saying that and it entertains me. So go with it. Tonight, we're going to start working with the form workspace. So as I mouse over, create form, unlike the way we've been working so far, as I said, we've been starting with sketches and such, and extruding and revolving and cutting holes in them and making patterns and blah, 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 blah. A much more engineering and architectural way of working. Tonight, we're going to start working from a more sculptural standpoint, so a more organic way of shaping. There are certainly pros and cons to that. Immediately, what we'll go into is that you have a lot more free form options to work with. The problem with that definitely ends up being that it's a bit more, I won't say permanent, but you don't get the history slider at the bottom of the page or bottom of your timeline there, because it's all within a work environment. Think of how when you're working on sketches, everything that you do to that sketch is within the sketch environment. And then when you finish sketch, you can add more things to it, but that is other operations. Similar thing here. But what we're going to start with tonight is just go through some basics and show you how to model a spoon. As you can see, modeled here. I'm going to start with a canvas just to give a reference, and we're going to freeform as close as we can manage to that. You do not have to start from a canvas. I just wanted to start from one so I can show you how that goes. So let's start with that. First thing, let me start a new project. And we'll save. So first thing, save, sample, in class, form, edit, examples. And we're just going to go through some examples. All right. So the first thing you do is select the create form. This changes your entire workspace toolbar. As Fusion attempts to be more intuitive, it tries to hide tools that it doesn't figure that you would need. Sometimes it's more problematic, but in this case, it's all the things. So there's a lot of friendly favorites. You can still make a box, a plane, cylinder, sphere, torus, donut, quad ball, which is a different type of sphere. Think of sphere as in globe, quad ball as in soccer or volleyball, and then still pipes. Obviously, pipe, very different looking, kind of. And you can still work with extrudes, revolves, sweeps, and lofts. They're just far more organically able to be made. Over here, we're going to start playing with a couple of the immediately long list of modifiers. And some of the symmetry, which is how you can work, obviously, symmetrical or not. And then from there on, you have a lot of your same regulars, construction planes, inspection tools, canvases, that sort. So first, let's play around. I'm going to make a box. Well, it says box, but let's draw something out. And in my toolbox, it says start from the center, direction, one side, operation, new body. Okay, so far, same as we have. We can draw this out. You can tab over, type something in numerically, whatever. Okay, well, it's a box. But because this is a more organic workspace, it doesn't come out as a geometric form. So as I start to add dimension to it, it's like an eraser. It's a gummy, goopy thing. You also have these additional sliders here. You can also do this numerically. These allow you to subdivide the faces on this. Now, we touched on face division a little bit in the previous project, which is literally just splitting up the surface into more faces, into more lines, vertices, and general squarish faces. You can adjust that numerically, or you can use the sliders. To the left has a minus sign, so obviously less. To the right is a plus sign, more. Subdivides it a whole lot. I will tell you right now, work simply first, then chop it up. You can always add more lines later. Once you get more experience with this, yeah, go ahead and start by adding a few extra division lines and work from there. I prefer to work as simply as I can and then divide it up after. So for right now, going over the toolbox, you have your You have your length, length faces, width, width faces, height, height faces. Direction, same thing we've been doing. Symmetric obviously makes the whole thing symmetric from where you started, but we'll say with one direction. You have a couple other options. Symmetry. You can either add symmetry or leave it as none. If I select that, you can select any number of symmetries here. Length, and you see this green line appears. That now means that on either side of that green line will be symmetric. I can change that over or add to. Now there's width symmetry and or height. So now with all three of those selected, anything I do to this one section here, it'll happen all over. But let's start a little more simply. Start with none. An operation, new body. Great. So we have this, and you can see as I mouse over, it's automatically wanting to select different faces. You get the idea. So what I can do with those faces is modify. So the standard three you have up here are edit form, which allows you to do just that. You can manipulate edges or faces, edges, vertices, and any combination of those. You can push, pull, scale up and down, twist, rotate. I know that's basically the same thing. Move them all around. Insert edge is how you can add more faces. If I select that and I select any of these edges, you see this green line appear. If I double select that line, now a whole ring appears. That is just adding more faces. So if I had done that in the creation space, when I originally created this box, I would have added more of these faces. This is just a way to add more. We'll get to that in a minute. The other one we're using tonight is thicken. It does exactly what it says. It takes a thinner object or a thinner series of faces and adds dimension to it. Now, what you can do with all of this stuff, well, before I get to do with all this stuff, first let me talk about utilities. And mainly the one up top here. If I mouse over this is display mode. As you start working with a potentially more complex face or set of faces, it can get really overwhelming, especially as it starts organically. We've been working very geometrically all semester. So starting with something organic is a little jarring. If you prefer, I can select here, and I can select this whole thing, and I can alter how it's displayed. Sorry, it's displayed as a more angular box. That I know helps me. We already have a minimal amount of faces. It just takes the smoothing away. Go back to full rounded. There we are. Or you can do a combination. So the object, no matter what, is still rounded, but I can apply the visual of the square box around, and you can treat this as control boxes, as an outline control element. Kind of thinking like when we would work with fit point splines, and you'd have the handlebars to manipulate. You'd have those handlebars floating in space. They don't actually exist on the drawing. They're just there as a visual representation for you to see how to grab onto things. Very similar thing here. So I'm going to leave this as this split control face so you can see both modes. All right. So the outer box is just ghosted there. So when I deselect it, you can see it's just these outer boxes here. And when I select this vertex here, you can see it will select, or I select this outer control box vertex, and you can see it automatically selects the one inside on the actual face of the rounded object. So it's showing you what the actual relationship is. Or I can select the one inside if I disabled this view style. So you get the idea there. If I select a face, you see the interface highlighted. So you get an idea of both of them. All right, let's play around with some stuff. I'm gonna go to edit form. My toolbox comes up. Got a whole bunch of stuff I can select. So you have your standard selection, of course, because this is what you want to grab. You have your transform mode, which means how are you actually translating stuff? When I have the multi one selected, let me just select a face. You have all your transform items here, everything within your gimbal. And in your standard, you have your arrows, which slide things in a single direction. The word fell out of my head, sorry. As I zoom in, which is sometimes irritating that the gimbal doesn't get larger, you can see a bunch of other boxes. So let's just isolate some so we can see what we're doing here. I'm going to slide on my toolbox. I'm going to go all the way over to scale. So now it took away some of them, and I just see representations of the original origin planes. Then you have these three little lines on each outside. Those are your scale options per plane. And grab one, you can see a couple of bars come in and out. As I slide it, it scales in one direction, shrinks and grows. Same with the one that's horizontal, shrinks and grows. I can select the curved one. That does a two-dimensional scale up and down. If I wanted to do a uniform three-dimensional scale, right at the center, as I mouse over, three arrows appear over that cursor. Grab that. Now you see it's growing in all directions, which isn't really as observable if I just have one face selected. But if I select a couple more, now I can grab that, and now you can see what really happens there if I scale up and down the whole to-do here. So you can really get weird with this. So let's Control Z that. Other selections, I have rotations. I can grab this whole thing, and orbit it. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see what's happening here. So it is orbiting that whole set of faces all around. Now, you twist too far, you're going to run into some serious problems with calculations. But you can see how you can twist it in one direction, another, and then the other is actually inside, so it gets a little weird to grab onto, but grab out to there. Selected just the translation, you have your arrow keys. You can drag it one direction, the other. If I mouse over the square, this allows me to freely move it within both of those directions. You cannot grab this and move it in all three directions simply because of how our input options go. As in, you're working with a mouse and keyboard. If you're working in a VR environment where you could like grab something virtually and move it as your hand can move, yeah, you can move it in three directions. This don't do that. So now if I go back to my transform selection mode and select all the things, now you have all your options at your disposal. Other toolbox options here, you have your view space selection by grid, or sorry, by selection or by local view. This confuses the crap out of me sometimes, so I usually leave this as regular coordinate space. The other option here is your selection filter. If I select by vertices, I'm only going to be given the option to select vertices. So I grab just one. I can free transform that however I want. The face, or sorry, the edges, I'm grabbing just the edge, and I can move that however I want. If I double click that edge, it selects its pair. Faces, you get the idea. I can just select faces. I can select a whole bunch of them and move all that around. Or you can leave it by all, and now I have all of my options available. I can select a face and an edge and a vertex and just completely confuse this program. So you have a bunch of options. Body, of course, is that you can select the whole thing all at once. So that would just allow you to generally like move it or squish it or scale it, however you want. In a moment, we're also going to get into some of these other options, especially the soft modification that allows you to smooth things out a little more easily. So one of the first things I'm going to tell y'all, spend some time just playing with these. The Form Edit tool will allow you to do all kinds of weird stuff and just experiment with it. That's the best thing I can tell you with the Form workspace. Play around. There's so much to learn with this. Obviously, we're only going to get to touch on a little bit of it. Resume. Okay. So let's try to actually do some stuff with this. First, let me delete that nightmare and get back to just a box. So start back up. We'll make something, 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 something. I'm going to keep this simple. Okay. So one of the other things you can do with this program is you can also freely extrude with this. So I'm going to go to select the edit, the form edit tool. I'm going to have all of my things selectable, and I'm going to select a face. Now, normally I can just drag this, but if I hold down Alt while I do this, I believe it's hold down Command on Mac, it will actually extrude out. I let go of Alt, press and hold again, and I can keep extruding as I go. Each time, pause and release. I can also do things like scale this as I go. I can make this bigger, make this smaller, drag it some more, making teeny tiny things here. I can start to freely transform this, or perhaps rotate it so that when I extrude again, I can start making like tentacles and all kinds of stuff. Now this is still, I'm going to have to rotate this if I'm still playing with it this way. So like I said, you have to learn some stuff to figure out how to really manipulate it like this, but you can really get to play with this. You can also repair any of this stuff. Excuse me. If I double select this line here or double click it, it'll select the whole thing. Now I could say scale it down. I could make like little ribs into it, or I could slide that back and forth, move it out of the way. Oops. Rotate this, all kinds of weirdness. So you can see how you can very quickly start to just freely sculpt things. What you can also do, like I was saying, is start simple. Say I wanted to create something like, I don't know, let me just pull this single point out, dragging outward. But now I decide, you know what? I really would like to cut. I really wish I had had more faces to work with here. And go to the, let me hit OK with the edit form, insert edge, and I can select any face or any edge line, and a green line appears outside. I can select more of those and split that face up. I can move it up and down, however, wherever I want. The default is 0.5 because it's a value of 0 to 1, 0 being the starting line, 1 being the next line. Select OK. Now it cut that face even more. Great, I'm making a sperm. Anyway, from here, I could start to drag this out. Let's make some antenna. From there, I can, oops, press Alt, drag that one out, turn this into like a little slug or something, give it some horns, whatever have you. So right now, I'm pressing Alt, dragging outward, scale down a bit, press it down. Now press Alt, press and hold again, drag out again. So I've made this weird horned thingy. Okay, you can get weird with this. You can also delete faces. So let's say I want to chop that out. Oops, you have to be finished with the edit form space. And I just delete those. Now this is just an open-ended surface. So the difference now being is this is literally only the surface value. So there's nothing internal. You could not print this right now. You'd have to repair it or close it up into a solid. To do that, and don't worry, I'm not just throwing a bunch of the stuff at y'all, and I'm going to not explain how to use it later, because we're going to run into some of these problems later. If you need to delete or surfaces or something like that, and you need to close them back up, go to Modify, Fill Hole. Pretty straightforward. I want to select that edge. And there it goes, it repairs it. And you have some options. I have the reduced star, it just did what it did. fill star, and you see it's doing some other stuff. Let me change the let me change my view selection. You can see the other. Sorry, I'm trying to move the zoom control bar out of the way so I can actually get to my tools. We go to visual style and hidden edges. There we are. You're seeing a little bit more. The other option here is collapse. So you could then collapse everything down to a single point. You can weld the edges together, which I'll explain in a moment, and maintain crease if you want that to stay as a sharp edge line. So this is what I mean by just press stuff and figure out what it does, because there's going to be a lot of different options to play with. So select OK. All right, well, Neato Burrito, if I want to just make some weird thingy thing, let's select that, get rid of my nightmare worm. What if instead I want to create, let's say, a sphere here. Start at the regular, and I'll just start right in the center. Make it large. Sure, 200. Why not? Doesn't really matter. I can increase or decrease the faces. Again, fewer. Well, you can only have so few faces before it no longer resembles the shape you want. Oops. Same thing with latitude, only it'll still maintain spherical shapes. So play around with that. And I'll play with symmetry in a moment. So from there, let's keep it even. Okay. Select OK. All right. So with this one, I want to work symmetrically. Now you might come to it as maybe you're working one way and you want to add symmetry later, or in that toolbox you could have just added symmetry. One of the default tools up here under symmetry is just that. We'll go through the options here. Mirror symmetry, internal, means it is symmetrical within the object. Internal means it's of the object itself. So I can select one face and then another, and it will draw a symmetry line between those two faces. So you see the green line just appeared there? Same thing would happen if I selected one of these, one of those. Problem is if they're dissimilar, you start getting weird stuff happen. So let's select one of those, or let's say do it down here, and look, if I orbit up a little bit, you can see kind of where it's going to obviously occur. Somewhere further out, there you go. Okay, now if I edit and let's extrude one of these faces, or just move it, now it does it on both sides. So obviously you get the idea there, how it can very quickly become a symmetrical object. Cool. You can also add far more symmetry. Let me just finish this form. I'll leave that there, and we'll do another, or we'll make another one. Same sphere, same spot, 200. There we are. Other symmetry, oops, other symmetry down here, circular symmetry. Orbit up here, and now I can select more than two faces. Select there. Now, if I just select one, it's giving me these other prompts. If I select this one, it's just going to make it symmetrical across these two faces. If I select here, two lines appear, so it's symmetrical across four faces. Or select where it says 8. What do you know? 8 points of, or 8 lines of symmetry. And you have the options here, of course. Select OK there. Now, if I edit one of these faces, I just have one, but you see all my longitudinal lines are now highlighted. If I just press and hold Alt and extrude outward, now it does it in all directions. So very cool. You can do a lot with this. If you want to make a multi-armed propeller, whatever. But that's how you can play around with different symmetries. And again, I just invite you to just play, experiment, see what happens. As you just play around with this, you're going to find weird stuff happens, especially when you have rounded objects and you have the multi-sided symmetry active. Okay. Let's finish that form. Ah, good. Okay. This is one of the first errors you're going to run into. If this comes up, it's going to give you an error. T-spline model failed to convert, because as you're sculpting, freely sculpting, you will at some point have to finish, and it will convert it from an active form back to a solid, which is what we've been working with. So what it's telling me is faces or edges might be crossing. Okay, so let's return. It's going to leave that error code up. Let's have a look. What happened here is that last operation, it got too thin. So what happened is the faces are actually overlapping themselves. Real weird. So you have a couple of options. You can just Control Z and back out of that. Well, actually, that was one of the former ones. So let's go back and redo those. The other option is go to Utilities and Repair Body. So I'm going to select this whole body. Ooh, that's a lot of stuff to repair. See all these little stars? These are the vertices that's telling you it has problems. And it has a lot of problems. So let's see if this is even repairable. Select the second option here is auto repair. Hit that, and it's giving you a whole bunch of points here. So let's just see what happens. Weld tolerance, sure. Let's try that, change that to 0.1. Let's see what that does. Stars went away. Okay. This might not be solvable because I wasn't paying close attention with that. Ultimately, what you're probably going to need to do, as it says, review it in box mode. This is where that other mode comes into play. If I select over to my other viewport or my other display option, it simplifies everything. Now I can see everything as like just more of a basic square forms. Okay. That might mean what I could do, since all the symmetries are active, let's try edit form, and I'm just going to grab this face, and since it's all going to follow suit, I'm just trying to orbit upwards here. Let's grab here, and let me just try to bring it back out this way. So all I did was I just kind of reversed the direction a little bit of that last operation I did, by grabbing one of the faces, the end face, which would have been the one that I was extruding and manipulating and playing with anyway. Select OK. Let's see how they change. See how those now change direction. Click OK. There we are. It worked. So that's all it was. It just was telling me that basically what happened is those two outer edges crossed one another, and that can't happen. So just playing around. So again, obviously I've made some kind of weird, super deluxe, whatever have you here. Okay. So again, those are extremely basic elements of playing with the form edit space or the form workspace, just playing around with a couple of the basic forms to be created. We didn't even get into cylinder or plane, any of that stuff. We're just playing with the general ones and a couple of the basics for the modifiers, symmetry, and utilities. So I highly recommend experiment, play around, mess stuff up, try to see what you can repair. And at worst, if you really run into just a horrifying mess of a virtual blob, now delete it. But next, let's actually do something we can actually work with. So I'm going to finish this video here, play around, experiment, just literally find out what you can do with some of these tools. It'll be a mess, but it'll be interesting. But good luck with it. All right.